38% of Americans delayed medical care due to cost in 2022. That's a record high, due to cost. So almost 4 out of 10 Americans are delaying medical care. So now tell me about how socialized medicine is bad because you have to wait. Tell me, by the way, remember they go, oh, you have to wait. Yeah, you have to wait for things that you can wait for. You don't have to wait for things you can't wait for. You know, in America, you have to wait. Yeah, 4 out of 10 Americans are waiting until they get more money. I went to get my gallbladder taken out. I couldn't even get, I had a gallbladder attack. I was certain I was going to die. I didn't, obviously. So they said, you got to get your gallbladder out. So I made an appointment with my with a surgeon. I couldn't even get an appointment with a surgeon for over a month. Just to get it. And so I got another surgeon who wasn't in my Blue Cross thing that I was going to have to pay more out of pocket for. I was able to get in with him in 3 weeks. And then he did the surgery. So it took me just to get a meeting with the surgeon was a month inside my insurance protocol. So this idea that you'd have to wait for service or medical care in the United States is ridiculous because you do all the time. And so there it is. 4 out of 10 Americans are delaying their medical care because of cost. And Joe Biden doesn't give a shit, and neither do any of the Democrats, because nobody's talking about medical care since Joe Biden got elected. Nobody's talking about Medicare for all. They're not even talking about the public option that Joe Biden promised everybody. New polling finds that the proportion of Americans who have delayed medical treatment due to the cost has hit a record high as the pandemic rages on and it becomes harder for working class to afford regular and emergency costs. According to Gallup, 38% of Americans had either put off seeking medical treatment themselves or a member of their families did so in 2022. This is a 12% rise from the proportion of Americans who experienced this in 21 and 20. This is an all-time high since Gallup began recording this data in 2001 and a 5% increase over the previously record high of 33% in 2019. So I think it's stories like this, Kurt, that show why it was so important that the squad didn't force a vote on Medicare for all. Otherwise, who knows how much worse these numbers would be. Remember they said if they had a vote on it, it would set us back. How much worse would it be if they had a vote on Medicare for all?
Set us back? Remember that's really amazing. Yeah.
Younger people, women...
I would hate to have... I'm sorry.
Yeah. Younger people, women, and those with lower incomes were most likely to put off care. Of course. While 35% of people aged 18 to 49 put off medical care, only 13% of people over 65... You know why? Because they have Medicare. Meanwhile, those with an annual household income under $40,000 were almost 2 times more likely to put off medical care for a serious condition than those with household incomes above $100,000. Gallup wrote that the sharp rise can be attributed to high inflation rates, which have created financial hardships for over half of households. Indeed, households are being hit extremely hard financially from many angles. Healthcare costs are becoming increasingly unaffordable for both the uninsured and those with insurance. I had insurance, we went bankrupt. And pharmaceutical companies continue to raise costs of prescription drugs at a rate that far outpaces inflation. Healthcare unaffordability is a uniquely American problem. The U.S. spends more than any other wealthy country on healthcare each year as a result of being the only wealthy country without universal healthcare and basic health-related provisions like guaranteed paid sick and parental leave. Research has found that the pharmaceutical industry, which is behind one of the U.S.'s most powerful lobbies in D.C., makes more money off the United States sales than all other countries combined for many key drugs. The high cost of healthcare, including the high cost of COVID and long COVID care, could be worsening the pandemic as people put off getting treated for illnesses due to cost. Hey, look, new study. More than 335 lives could have been saved during the pandemic if we had universal healthcare. They never talk about that. It's weird. Fauci never once mentioned the importance of universal healthcare to help save 335,000 lives. He just says masks and vaccines and shut the fuck up. The amount of money available to the average American is also a factor. In contrast to 2022, in 2020 and in 2021, a relatively low number of people put off seeking medical care compared to the previous years, likely due to the fact that provisions in the stimulus packages passed by Congress drove down economic hardship, plunging poverty rates down to record lows. But politicians have now allowed provisions like the expanded child tax credit and stimulus payments to expire or be set aside. Even though inflation is soaring, even the initial $1,200 stimulus checks authorized in December 2020 are worth about $150 less now than they were then, thanks to inflation. In the absence of the government aid, the working class is also being hit with accelerated trends of wealth inequality that are sapping wealth away from regular people to the top 1%, as spurred by neoliberal policies. Trends that started before the pandemic, but which have accelerated in recent years. In 2021 and 2022, for instance, workers got a wage cut in real wages due to the inflation, with workers having their pay cut by roughly 2% each year. With stagnant wages for workers combined with increased costs for things like college education and housing over the past decades, the working class has been doubly hit, and the middle class, which is already shrinking, is in crisis. Last year, data showed that from March 10th to October, the average wealth of the middle 40% of Americans dropped by 7%, the single largest drop since the Great Recession. Kurt, are comedy clubs talking about it?
What do you mean?
Because it's so. I'm like, are ticket sales down because of the economy? Is it because of COVID? I wonder if are they talk. I don't know how you can tell, right? Because COVID was such a screwball.
I feel like when when it's bad, I tend to do better. I think people spend more on recreation than, like there's a lot of like blowing off steam being done, I feel like, more now.
The CBO, this is the Congressional Budget Office. If Democrats push socialized medicine, get ready for rationing. That's from the right-wing Federalists. Great news. No one needs to get ready because it's already happening. Great news. I bet you'll be happy. So Ice Cube reportedly turned down a $9 million contract because he wouldn't take the vaccine. Here he is.
I turned down a movie because I didn't want to get the jab. I turned down $9 million.
Damn.
Because I didn't want to get the jab.
You didn't want to get,
that jab. And y'all for trying to make me get it.
Oh, because you wouldn't get the COVID shot.
Yeah, the COVID shot.
Oh,
the jab. The jab. Yeah.
During the pandemic.
He wouldn't let him poke.
During the pandemic, man. The pandemic.
At all.
You didn't me either.
Nothing.
I didn't catch it at all.
Yeah, I didn't need.
So there you go. And oppose that too. I just juxtapose that with her. I've just lost a few people in my weekly routine who have refused or did not disclose whether or not they had been vaccinated. And it was unfortunate. I feel it's your moral and professional obligation to inform, since we're not all potted up and being tested every single day.
Oh, I bet that was a real loss for them.
Yeah. So she had the opposite view. I thought that was interesting.
Her weekly routine, like who? Her barista, and
right? Who is she not talking to? So she said she's cut people out of her life. I hope it's not Chandler or Ross.
You think it's Chandler?
I think it's Chandler. He's such a rebel.
What about Joey?
Joey's the kind of guy who he'll get the vax and tell you.
I don't understand why people can't just get fake cards. It's not that hard. Especially Ice Cube. Ice Cube, you couldn't have whipped up something for $9 million.
For $9 million, right? Yes, I definitely would have.
$500,000 on a really good fake card.
Yeah, give a counterfeiter $1 million.
I'm shocked at his consistency of F the man over the years, and I'm also blown away that he didn't think to just get a fake card.
So I'm jealous of him now. How about that? Because my neck still hurts, and who knows what else. Good for Ice Cube, huh? Tough. Yeah. That's a guy. Good for him. So what's weird is when they say Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is a big conspiracy theorist and a nut job and crazy and nobody should ever listen to her. It's weird, though, that she's out lefting the left all the time. She was out lefting the squad on Ukraine. She's out lefting them on COVID, and she's telling the truth about COVID. So she says, remember when they told you not to take ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine to help you with COVID? I remember that. I remember when they told us that. They threatened to take away doctors' and pharmacists' license if they prescribed it. I remember that. My doctor told me that, and it was very hard for people to get prescriptions of ivermectin. They controlled and limited distribution of monoclonal antibodies. Remember that? I remember that. So if you lived in a red state, you could get monoclonal antibodies. But if you lived in a blue state, very hard to get them. They were politicizing medicine at the behest of Big Pharma. That's for
even
Big
Dr. Fauci.
Pharma.
He was concerned about, he goes, I don't know why there's not more monoclonals around.
That's
So I'm
right.
concerned. Remember that?
Remember that even Fauci said, I don't know why there's not more monoclonals. He knows exactly why there weren't more monoclonals. So they owe answers, and I'll be asking. So turns out she's right about that. And when someone's right about something, no matter if you disagree with them on every other thing, you should try to prop them up. Even if you, I probably disagree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on 99.9% of the things she says or believes. But she's right here.
Jimmy, I disagree with 90% of the things I've been told she believes. I don't think there's Jewish space lasers.
I mean, so now here's our favorite pretend journalist who's actually a propagandist. He retweets her and says, this is what anti-science extremism looks like. No, actually, Walker, you're what anti-science extremism looks like because you're not following the science. You've never followed the science. Marjorie Taylor Marjorie Taylor Greene is correct, and you're wrong. Does it make you feel good to be dumber and wronger publicly than Marjorie Taylor Greene? Because you are on the regular. This pandemic is still killing thousands every week, so I guess he didn't see the op-ed in the Washington Post by Dr. Lena Wen that said we're overcounting COVID deaths. That's the Washington Post. So he loves them because they hate Trump. And so I don't know why he doesn't listen to him on this. This pandemic is still killing thousands every week. But Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene are using public office to persecute scientists. No, you're the ones doing that. Anybody who has a counter narrative to the establishment Big Pharma funded narrative about COVID gets silenced and deplatformed. That's what you're doing. That's what your tribe is doing. That's not what they're doing. They're not silencing anybody. Public ought try to persecute scientists, sow confusion, and promote quackery. That's exactly what Walker Bragman's doing continuously. Continuously. It's dangerous. No, what you're doing is dangerous. So so down here, Jake Gillespie comes into his tweet and replies and says, haha, ivermectin is dangerous with all these smiley faces. And then he says, gee, it's funny how it wasn't at all dangerous until COVID-19 came along and they had to ban it from the shelves because it actually works. You should be ashamed of yourself. Ivermectin works like a motherfucker. Now, I can't say it works on COVID-19. I'm not saying that. But ivermectin works for lots of things. I'm not saying that it works for COVID-19. But the reason why they had to lie about ivermectin was because on the chance if it did treat COVID-19, then they couldn't get their emergency use authorization. Same thing with hydroxychloroquine. If either of those things worked, they couldn't get their emergency use authorization and they would lose $100 billion. How much is $100 billion, Walker? That's enough to buy everybody in the corporate media in the United States, plus everybody in government. That's a lot of people because that's a lot of money. And they did it. And then they got guys like you to repeat their big pharma-funded propaganda. And this guy ratioed him on it. So the good news is no one is listening to him anymore, right? People like this. That's why I'm doing this, to show you that the tide has turned. And people aren't listening to idiots like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Sam Harris or Dr. Fauci or this guy anymore. You want to see how they're not listening to him? 33 likes. That's in his own Twitter followers. That's all this can muster. when he's smearing people who are right. And this guy ratioed him. He told me, you should be ashamed of yourself. He got 117 likes. This guy's only got 33. His own followers are done with this bullshit. So that's why I'm showing you this, because it's encouraging. Because for 2.5 years now, I've had a 1 million pound weight on my shoulders, wondering what's going on in the world. No one will listen to science. No one will listen to logic. No, everybody's shaming questions. And so finally it's turning. So this is very good news to share with you. He goes on, once again, the COVID vaccine scandal. This is another tweet of his. The COVID vaccine scandal isn't that the jabs don't work.
Jeez.
It's that they're patented. That's the problem. That's the problem. LOL. The corporations aren't bad for having faulty products. They're bad for not giving their shit products away for free.
The portions are too small.
The food is horrible here, and the portions are so small.
Yeah.
So, again, I think the vaccine is safe and effective, and it's wonderful, and it'll keep you
and
from
they deserve a patent.
They deserve a patent because they keep you from getting seriously ill, hospitalized, or death, and they slow
you come up with a thing that great, you think you shouldn't have a patent, Walker?
Your heart should be swelling with pride over the vaccine. So there you go. That guy nearly ratioed him in his own thread. So here's one more. Hearing radio ads for them now. This is I love this. Gotta give it to Big Pharma. It's a narrow and short landing strip to land and taxi a pandemic into the once-a-year booster for maximum profit hangar. That's pretty good writing, huh? That's pretty good writing. It's a narrow and short landing strip to land and taxi a pandemic into the once-a-year booster for maximum profit hangar.
Well, it's easy when you're flying a small private plane.
So anyway, Vax slows the transmission and contraction. It's fantastic. It keeps you from getting seriously ill, hospitalized, or death. The vaccines are safe and effective. Super duper.
I don't know, between me and you, I get high from it.
Yeah. Now Kurt's joking. He doesn't really mean that. So I have to provide context. I
do take a lot of it.
I'm providing. You're not supposed to snort it. I want to talk about the COVIDians are now backtracking, right? So some of them are, right? So now I don't know if you go on social media or not, but I go on a lot on Twitter only and YouTube. And so I'm starting to notice people are embarrassed of their old COVID takes. And the people who used to smear me on the regular are now tucking their tail and running the other way most of the times. We showed you this guy Josh Olson. Now, he's an Academy a nominated screenwriter. He wrote that movie, A History of Violence. And we're casual acquaintances, and he's one of these guys who's been doing those pot shots against me, smears with nothing to back it up, and he doesn't know anything about COVID or the science behind any of the things that have to do with COVID. They just repeat Big Pharma propaganda, and they act like they're a better person than you for not being informed. And so he tweeted this out the other day. I showed this to you in another video, but he says, reminder, we are not out of COVID, and it's still got potential to wreck your life. Wear a mask, stay safe, ignore anyone who politicizes it, as he's politicizing it.
I know.
And he says, even if you think they're on our team. I didn't know there were teams on COVID, Josh. Apparently there are teams. So he's being super tribal. He's being everything. So this is classic Jungian projection. He's being everything that he is, and his conscious mind won't allow him to acknowledge. So he's that part of himself where he's tribal and he politicizes things he puts in his unconscious, and then he projects it onto other people. That is classic Jungian psychology. And the problem is he's not a big enough person to recognize it once it's pointed out to him and apologize. He just doubles down and never apologizes for smearing me or for being 100% wrong. I'm using him as an example. There's lots of people like this. I'm using him as an example. Lots of my old friends are like this. Right? Dave Anthony would be one of those guys who hosts that podcast. And he's there's lots of them, myriad guys. So he tweets this out, completely outs himself for being a moron about COVID and tribal and politicizing it. And so, and he says that she's not on. You think that she's on your team? She's not. Ignore her. Not engage her. So here, I just want to show you this is what he was referring to.
You know what? Life is short and precious, and we're in a profession that celebrates the arts at a time when we're out of COVID, we're back together, and if we're not celebrating this moment right now, what are we doing?
So that's what he's referring to when he says ignore her, not engage her, not ask her why she thinks we're out of COVID, because COVID has now mutated the virus and it's become Omicron, which now presents as a much less deadly virus and much more contagious. So it's not as deadly as it was. In fact, it now presents as a cold. That's the symptoms. Are present as a cold for most people. So that's why she would say that. And Josh would say, just ignore her, shun her. Even if she votes for Democrats, shun her. That's what he means by that. So I pointed that out on the show. Someone actually said, Josh, eventually, not today or tomorrow, but eventually you will realize, like many of us have, that we were lied to on a level that we were not able to comprehend when it was happening. One day you will regret shaming those of us for asking questions. And so then I showed this to Josh Olson. I said, if we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you've given a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. And that's from Carl Sagan, super sciencey guy. And so that's what's happened to Josh, and lots of people like him, and they don't have the character to just apologize and grow and learn from this and promise to never make this mistake again. But
they don't have the guts of a Tim Robbins.
They don't have the guts of a Tim Robbins. Exactly right. Or me, or even close to me, because I was out in front of this 2 years ago. So I went to his Twitter feed today to see how he's handling that I covered his bullshit on my show. Well, guess what has happened? So if you go to his Twitter and you want to, so here's his latest tweet he made like a couple hours ago. It's about nothing, but he's deleted all of his tweets back to May 3rd, 2022. So he's deleted all of them. That almost for a whole year, he's deleted his tweets.
Brother.
It goes back to April. Here he is, April. So, holy shit. So instead of just apologizing and saying, yeah, you know what, we lost our heads and I'm sorry. And we can all learn now. And of course, questions aren't bad. And of course, we should have questioned Big Pharma way harder, because it turns out they were lying at every turn. They were lying about masks. They were lying about herd immunity. They were lying about natural immunity. They were lying about where the virus came from. And they called you a racist if you said it came from a lab. They were lying about funding gain of function. They were lying about doing gain of function. There wasn't a transmission. They never even tested for it. They wanted to keep the data hidden for 75 years. That's called regulatory capture. The FDA didn't want to release the vaccine trial data for 75 years. So these people will never, they don't have the character and zero integrity to acknowledge this and move on. What they'd rather do is delete a year's worth of tweets so nobody could go check on their bullshit. That's what they'd rather do. That is fucking amazing. I couldn't believe it. I kept going over it like, I'm missing something. He didn't do this. I know
what it is.
What?
Look at it. Oscar-nominated screenwriter and all these things are not particularly well known, but he means he's in the mix. And so now what do? Because you couldn't get on a lot anywhere without your boosters and whatever for like the last 2 years.
Right.
My manager had to be like, somehow swing it to work from home to even go to work. So that whole circle of people, what do you do if you know you're wrong, but you don't want to jeopardize your career, which is what they always choose.
That's right.
Take your pick of bad things that came out that they were all on board for. They all get on board. You're not going to, you want to risk your career. So that's what, I'll bet you that's what that is.
Well, here's another guy, this guy, Walker Bragman, who pretends he's a journalist. And what he is a repeater of propaganda at the top of his lungs all day. But he's losing. He used to make a tweet like this, and he would get 1,000 or 2,000, 4,000 likes. And now he can't even crack 50. So that's a good sign that the COVIDians are losing, and but people are waking up. Even people who follow people like this are waking up to it. And I'll show you what he tweeted out. So I'll do this in another. I don't want to do it in.
Well, also, Jimmy, if your entire position depends on not doing research, that's probably not going to last a long time.
Yeah.
When the whole thing hinges on not looking anything up.
So I don't know if I should include this in here, but here is Walker Bragman. He says, in case you missed it, Brownstone Institute. Now, the Brownstone Institute is made up of people like Robert Malone and Peter McCullough, the people who were right about COVID and were sounding the alarms early on. Robert Malone was the doctor who invented the mRNA vaccine technology at the Salk Institute in the 70s. So they try to discredit him constantly. Robert McCullough, the most cited and published cardiologist in the world, they try to discredit that guy. And so he is trying to discredit them, and watch how he does it. He says, in case you missed it, Brownstone Institute, a dark money group that's become a central hub for COVID misinformation. No, actual information. The hub for misinformation would be you, the corporate media, big pharma, and our captured regulatory agencies. Brownstone's founder, who has a neo-Confederate background. Do you see this shit? Doctors, they got doctors are so he cares which way a doctor votes. That's what this is.
Oh my God! Like I don't want a Confederate sawbones telling me.
So, and then he says right-wing business. So he's upset at a dark money group. A dark money group. You mean as opposed to big pharma funding? Is there someone who gets worse funding than the people in the corporate media from big pharma? You know who else is funded by big pharma? The FDA, to the tune of 70%. Did you know that? You going to do an article on how the FDA is corrupted because they get all their money from pharma? No, also, he's not going to do that because he has a narrative to push. He's not interested in the truth or facts. He's not interested in the right story. He's not interested in anything except validating his own need to be right about something he's been wrong about for 3 years.
Where's he a reporter right for?
Listen to what he says here. Oh. He says, right-wing, big business-aligned dark money has poisoned our national COVID discourse. Right-wing, big business-aligned dark money, not big pharma. That's not the money that has corrupted. They didn't corrupt the dialogue. It's people you never heard of that he figured out. It's doctors who had nothing to gain by sticking their chin out. Doctors who had nothing to gain by recommending early treatments. Doctors who had nothing to gain. That's who he's angry at. Not big pharma and the government and Fauci, the people who have been lying to us at every turn during COVID. He's not angry at them. He's angry at the people who debunk them. Wait, and he's not angry at big pharma funding. He's angry at other people funding things. What's that, Kurt?
Look at that. He goes, they politicized basic public health. Oh, just basic measures like locking everyone down.
They politicize. You mean like just basic stuff, mean like forced experimental medical treatments being jammed into your body and lockdowns that prove to be unbelievably hellish and counterproductive? You mean that? You mean those things? Politicize that? And again, this is a guy politicizing COVID. That's what this is. He's talking about who's getting their funding. He's not talking about their conclusions. He's not pushing back against these doctors' conclusions in any way. He's just trying to smear them because of the way they get their money. Well, why don't you smear the FDA and the CDC? Why don't you smear MSNBC and CNN and every other organization that does news? Because they all take big pharma money.
Hey, Jimmy, I hope he doesn't find out how NASA got their rocket ships back in the day. We don't like conclusions of bad people.
So we shouldn't be talking about how Big Pharma has completely captured our government and our complete capture of our media, which is why they made people think ivermectin was horse paste instead of a Nobel Prize winning human medicine that's on the WHO list of essential medicines. And they made it look like Joe Rogan was wrong when he was right about everything. And they had to lie about Joe Rogan. He's not mad about that. He's not mad about CNN taking 70% of their funding from Big Pharma and then lying about COVID constantly, lying about comedians, lying about early treatment. He doesn't care about that. He's upset that the doctors who are getting it wrong get their money from people he doesn't vote like. That's what he's doing. Hey, you want to worry about money? He's not worried about this money. He's not worried about Bill Gates owning everything, including the WHO and every fucking media organization that's controlling the narrative. The problem is the establishment doesn't have enough control of the narrative around COVID, according to a guy like Walker Brackman. They don't have enough control. Isn't that amazing? They should have the people. We should try to censor and silence people who have a counter narrative to the Big Pharma funded establishment story. We should not listen to them. They're bad. These are the good people because they don't get their money from anywhere except Big Pharma, people like Bill Gates. That's the good people. The people who are funded by Bill Gates and Big Pharma. They're the good people.
Is that not right-wing funding? I don't understand.
You tell me.
That sounds right-wing to the point of fascist, actually.
So I went to his thread and I just said this. I said, FYI, those doctors have all been proven correct, and you are a lying propagandist repeating Big Pharma talking points. Here is the guy you're simping for now. And it's when they confronted the guy, the head of Pfizer at the Davos meetings, and they asked him 27 questions. He wouldn't answer any of them. He wouldn't answer reasonable questions. That's the guy that Walker Brackman is simping for. And if you look, this is the way I'm reporting this is because it's positive. Because guys like Walker are being, people, even his own followers are seeing through them. And why am I showing you this? Because his stupid tweet trying to slander doctors who are right about COVID, trying to smear them, which is the opposite of journalism. You want to investigate somebody, investigate Pfizer, Moderna, the CDC, the FDA, and Dr. Fauci and Collins. And why were they lying about everybody and everything at every turn? But no, he's going to go after the guys who are actually sticking their chins out to tell the truth about COVID. And his own followers see through it now because he racked up a whole 116 likes on this. My response to him has 280 likes. So that's good to see that even his own followers aren't fucking and he had 10,000 views on it. So it's not like nobody saw it. His own followers saw it, nobody liked it. Nobody liked it. So that's the good news, that they're seeing through propagandists and fearmongers and cowards like people like Walker Brackman and Josh Olson. Josh Olson knows that he's such a coward. He had to take down a year's worth of tweets so people don't find out how dumb he's been about COVID and all the shitty stuff he said about people. Now that he found out he's wrong, somebody with character and integrity would go, hey, I was wrong. Someone who doesn't have those things and is a coward would go erase their Twitter feed from the last year. And that's what Josh Olson did. So congrats, tip of the hat. I hope when you have kids, you teach them this kind of grown-upness. Anything you want to say, Kurt?
Isn't he like a cartoonist, Walker Texas Brackman?
No, he's a journalist for he used to write for The Lever, I think, but I think he might write for his own like a Substack now or something. I don't know.
Was that the guy where his parents had some house in the Hamptons? Was that him?
Oh, he is also a cartoonist. He's also a cartoonist. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought. I wasn't sure if I was the same Walker.